I'm Chandler. If you guys don't know me, my name is Chandler Poling with White Bear PR, and I am also a co-founder of the Alliance for Women Film Composers, though I haven't been involved in the organization for a number of years. It's been great to be there at the start of it all. Um, but yeah, I mean, I will go ahead and start with some of my questions. I'm here with Kevin, Deana, and Sean Kiner. They're the composers of many, many Star Wars properties, such as Ahsoka, The Clone Wars, Rebels, The Bad Batch, Tales of the Jedi, and many more. So they are deeply embedded into this franchise, and we're here to talk about what it's like to work together as a family and work together on a franchise. So I think what would be great for me to learn a little bit is the upbringing, the musical upbringing of Sean and Deana. Is it something that was music something that you wanted to do, or was Kevin, your father, very much like you're doing this because it's awesome?
You
Um,
want me, you want, let me just go first and you guys can react to it because
Always.
my, my answer, no, I mean, my philosophy was just always my kids are going to have instruments and they're going to learn an instrument. It wasn't about becoming a musician at all. I just, around 6 or 7 years old, I made sure they had lessons on an instrument of their choice, including their sister Andrea, the middle child, who wound up becoming an artist. So that's my take on it. But I never I've never pushed either way, said don't I never pushed to become a musician or to not become a musician.
yeah, I mean, we had it. It was around us constantly when we were children. We would go and hang out in Kevin's studio, all growing up, seeing what he was doing, but really wasn't on on my radar as a potential career. I will say that in terms of musical upbringing, something that I think is really impactful was that because Kevin was spending all day with music, he didn't want to listen to any music on the like on during this downtime. And so we didn't actually listen to a ton of. He wasn't exposing us to like a lot of like pop or just like songs in general. And so really the soundtrack of my childhood ended up being film score. It was the music that I was hearing in Indiana Jones or Star Wars.
That's true for Sean. I had a rebellious streak. I started out young. Once picked up guitar, that was my first instrument. Um, I was like, I'm definitely going to be a composer. I'm going to be just like my dad. I'm going to do what he does. And then once I started to get to like junior high and high school, uh, I started to have like a rebellious streak and be like, no, I'm not going to do anything like my family. I'm going to stand out. I'm going to be different. And I was like, I'm going to be a firefighter. No, I'm going to be a fashion designer. I went all over the
Yeah, I
place.
remember fashion designer for sure. That lasted
Yeah.
that lasted a while. That
Yeah. I
scared
scared the
me.
crap out of you with that one,
Yeah, even more than musician, that one scared me.
which is fair. I get it. But then towards the end of high school, I was like, I do really like music. So the only school I ended up applying to was Berkeley, and luckily I got in, or Berkeley College of Music. And and then I still didn't want to do composing because it was just so scary to watch Kevin work. And like I looked at it and I was like, this is impossible. He's just making things up like on the fly. Like I don't understand how this is even possible. And then he just started handing me stuff when I graduated, and he was like, just try it. And then from there on, I was like, oh, I can actually pull this off.
Well, I think that's a really interesting, element of your guys' dynamic because I think a lot of composers are introduced to music obviously at a young age through their parents, and whether their parents are composers or not, it's that kind of influence as you're growing up of something you want to be a part of. I definitely love the alternate reality of Deana Kiner, fashion designer, but you know,
Which
where
may
I've
still
It would
happen,
go
actually.
so poorly.
Oh.
Great.
But I'm really happy that you guys all landed in the music field because, you know, you together you provide really incredible music across all these different stories. At what point did you decide to work together? I guess, Kevin, this is a question for you. When did you decide to start, you know, keeping it in the family?
You know, it was never a conscious decision. Like, we sort of never had a plan. I never had a plan. So Sean graduated from Pepperdine. Now, Sean started out on piano, and he was quite a prodigy. You know, I'm always amazed. I have many different friends who are musicians, and they come to it from so many different ways. I've talked to amazing piano players who were so angry at their father for putting an egg timer on the piano, and then they would go to the bathroom, and the dad would come and turn the egg timer back and make sure they had like 5 more minutes they had to practice. To other people like me, I just practiced all the time on my own. Sean, um, he was really great on piano and had a great teacher, but then he got into junior high and he took up saxophone and he loved that, and he didn't like the isolation of being a pianist, so then he got really into jazz band and saxophone. Then he went to Pepperdine and was going to become a writer, like screenplays and that kind of thing. So when Sean graduated, he didn't really. I don't know. Sean can speak more to it than I can, but the screenwriting was kind of falling flat with him, and um, he walked into my studio one time, and I was playing a Clone Wars episode that was brand new, and it had a temp track, and he kind of giggled, and I'm like, what's funny about that? And he goes, "Oh, that's Indiana Jones." And he told me like which Indiana Jones movie and which scene it was from, the temp track. And I mean, so I said, you know, you could take some of my tracks and repurpose them, because you know a lot of times in animation, like, you will only score about 2/3 of the show or something like that because of budgets or whatever. And so you could take, say, a lightsaber fight that I did a year ago and music edit it into a new episode. And so he started doing that. Um, and and then there's just kind of a natural evolution as you start music editing. It doesn't really fit. um, Maybe he needed some strings in a cue, and so he's like, "Hey, Dad, how do I put some tension in here? The cue I'm using doesn't quite work." And so then he started learning how to compose around those cues I had composed. Um, Dina's stories and so then Sean started composing with me, and then shortly thereafter, Dina had graduated. I mean, Dina's the only one of us that has a formal music education. I have absolutely no music education. I never took a single class. In fact, the only class I ever took was the history of jazz, which is just about history, and it was in Royce Hall, which made that particularly cool when I got to conduct the concert the other night, because that was one of my classes at UCLA. But
Hmm.
Dina, why don't you speak about how you came to it then?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of touched on it. Like I didn't really feel capable of it when I first graduated. I wanted to be a songwriter. I wanted to be in a band and do all that and tour and everything. And I was living at home. I was just working at Starbucks, and uh Kevin was just like, just like try it. Just try like a few small things. It's no big deal. Like, we
I
don't have
think
to send
Mom
this to the
hammered you pretty hard too on that.
yes. As she still does. And yeah, so like just kind of like he was very like loose about it. He was like, just try whatever, like here's the temp, like just kind of like uh mimic the elements of it and like build from there. And once I started getting into it, I realized how straightforward it was for me. And then what really like pulled me fully in was we started making a murderer. And because because my background is playing guitar, I felt a lot more capable of doing that show. So we really started to experiment, and like it was really fun for me to like really start trying different sounds, different approaches with guitar, because I didn't even really think about how guitar could be used for film score in such a way. And so that was a really cool way to like kind of begin my career.
And you really connected with Gustavo Santaolalla, I think. Deana learned the ronroco, which is a very difficult instrument to play. It's a South American 10-string instrument. Learned a lot of Gustavo's licks. I mean, to this day, Gustavo and Deana have a really cool connection because Gustavo feels like Deana does it better than I do. I'm positive Gustavo feels that way.
I still feel like you get a much better sound, but I love the sensibility. Like I love the approach that Gustavo has, where he really loves organic elements. He really loves like the human being behind the music, and the fact that you can feel the human in the music. And that's always what I'm going for whenever I'm scoring. And it was really cool to have that connection with him.
So what is the studio setup like? Are you guys all in a building
Everybody wants
together?
to know this.
Yes. Are you all in your separate zones? Yeah, everybody, those composers always want to know how the studios are set up. So yeah, just curious about, I know Kevin, you're currently not even in California, but if when you're at home, what's it like?
So I have a main studio. Initially, Sean was in the room next to my main studio, which was my old live room, but I had built a new live room. So the room right next to my control room at my studio now is for my assistant. So Sean had a rig in there with my assistant. Then we built an addition to our house, and Deana has uh, her studio, which that's where she is now, completely separate rig, completely separate building. It's still on our property. I mean, it's just, I don't know, 100 feet or something away from my studio, 140 feet. And that's how the three of us were for quite some time. Sean got married and had kids, and now Sean's in his own place, but still comes over quite a lot. I mean, I tell that story about Sean and Deana sitting at the piano coming up with Ahsoka's groove for Tales of the Jedi, the samurai groove. And, that's one of the times when Sean, I mean, he's only 20 minutes away. And he'll come over even for spotting sessions or something like that, or just whatever. So we're together quite a lot. And, Sean and Deana like sat at the piano and carved out that groove and figured out that way to extend Ahsoka's theme.
Very cool. Do you guys then, when you're separated into your own little zones, is that when you are obviously working on the tasks that you've divided, or how do you guys divide the work?
Man, everyone's different. We just spotted a show yesterday, and so we will kind of assign cues to each other, but we'll ping pong them back, elements back and forth. I mean, I just told Sean there's a certain element that Sean wants to work on, but I have ideas about it. So I'm going to work on that cue and send him my elements, and then he's going to play around with me. And so he will eventually write the cue, but it's going to be using part of my elements as well. And then Deana, I mean, Deana will play on, because Deana's so good at guitar and specific organic kind of acoustic guitar parts, or even, but so she'll play on our tracks too. Again, that show we just spotted yesterday, which I can't really say what it is, but one of the temp tracks was, or a couple of the temp tracks were Deana's, and we were texting each other back and forth, and Sean was like, Deana, is that you? That's unbelievable. So now we're both gonna take that cue because she did such a good job on it,
Now I have
And
to upload the session to Dropbox. Everyone takes in, tears it to shreds, and the
right, that's
creative
right.
process occurs.
Yeah, so she'll upload that session to Dropbox, and Sean and I will, yeah, take elements of it that we like, and that way she did all the work almost.
Cool. I'm curious when approaching a new project together, whether it's inspiring sessions or just when you get the kind of initial brief if you're pitching, uh, Star Wars or something like Dark Winds or anything that you're approaching. What are your first conversations about?
I feel like Sean usually starts
I,
the conversation.
yeah, I mean, I get very opinionated when it comes to Star Wars. Usually,
And very excited.
always very excited. It's a big responsibility. This is a piece of my childhood that I cherish and is part of my identity. And so adding to it in a meaningful way, feels like a big responsibility for, the incoming generations of kids that are going to be like me. So, usually when it comes to a Star Wars project, we try to figure out what its like traditional film roots are. In the case of Ahsoka, right? It's rooted in samurai cinema. So our score ended up being like a love letter to samurai cinema in that way. We steeped ourselves in those soundtracks and in that media. Even before we knew that we had gotten the show, because we were scoring Tales of the Jedi with it. We kind of thought of it as our pitch for our ability to do the show. It was kind of like a playground where we were testing out different ideas. And so we had already started listening to a lot of traditional Japanese music and watching samurai movies to get ourselves into that headspace. With Bad Batch, it was more of like an A-team, kind of Hogan's Heroes or Dirty Dozen kind of inspiration. And obviously, John is always something that we look at when we're starting a show. But we build the palette. We build like the tonal palette before we start on a show. And that way we can know what fits in Bad Batch or what fits in Ahsoka. It's a general guiding principle.
Do you guys, and Dina and Kevin, do you guys have any sort of additions that you want to make to kind of those early conversations or jumping into a project?
Yeah, sometimes I get very instrument focused. I've been trying to really kind of multi-instrumentalist myself. I guess I don't really know how to say that, but I've been trying to learn a lot of different things, and I picked up flute very seriously for Ahsoka, and I've been having a really good time picking up wind instruments again. I also played saxophone in middle school and high school, and then that's how I got into Berkeley. And I've been getting back into, I never played tenor for some reason. I think I was just too scared. I was too intimidated by it. But I've been having such a nice time.
Baritone sax. I
Yeah.
think Sean played alto sax, and you didn't want to do the same thing as your brother. That's how I looked at that. I don't know if that's why. Is that
I'm
why?
No,
also
it
a
was,
sax player, by the way, so
Oh, really?
oh, that's why you're so cool and
Yeah,
nerdy.
So that
that's
would
super
be
your vibe,
me,
Chandler.
Chandler, Sean, and Dina. We don't quite have a quintet, but I bet it would be pretty out of tune.
yes.
That is my main problem is intonation.
Unpracticed saxophonist here. Sorry, interrupted. Go ahead.
Oh, it's all good. But yeah, so usually sometimes when we're watching the show or getting a feel for it, I'm very much in the mindset of like, okay, what instrumentation is going to work in the palette that we're going for? What is going to be something that is really important to the sound of the show, the approach that we take. And usually it's just stealing something from Kevin and stealing something that he has lying around. I don't know if I can work in my own studio ever, just because I'm constantly going into his studio, taking something, and then he comes back and he steals it back.
I,
Just back and forth forever.
all my favorite instruments, Dina, it's like, oh, where's my favorite guitar? Where's my favorite whatever wind instruments? But over the years, I've collected. I mean, you look just over Dina's left shoulder there is a donkey jaw that you used. In which cue was that?
That was in the training sequence
Oh,
in Ahsoka. That was that's how I
right.
built that cue up, was when Sabine is doing like the blind training. I knew I wanted like a foundational like percussive instrument, and I was like, that thing's crazy. What can I do with that? And just started experimenting with it.
But
I love that time of
I,
experimentation. Oh, go ahead, Kevin.
yeah, a lot of that comes. I mean, I'm so blessed to have co-written with a lot of really cool composers, and speaking of Gustavo, I mean, before Gustavo, it was like David Arnold and Clint Mansell and all these really really great composers that I've co-written with, and it's enriched my life so much. And the thing that we really got from Gustavo is, you know, that's why there's a donkey jaw in my house, because it's like found instruments, found sounds, playing them in untraditional ways. Sean's now getting crazy into accordion and stuff, which you wouldn't think would happen. Um, yeah, and Dina's getting crazy into saxophone and making the sax.
Oh,
Oh,
did you crash?
Yeah.
is he cutting out for Gil?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we'll give him a second to see if he pops in, but I can move on to the next talking point. All right, he's back. Sorry, Kevin, you had a little glitch in the
Oh man.
matrix. I'm curious about working with Lucasfilm. Are they, providing blueprints of what you need to adhere to musically? Are they telling you these are the instruments of the Star Wars universe? Like, I'm curious about how Lucasfilm works as a franchise unit with Star Wars, musically speaking.
I mean, our um, the person who's giving those orders is Dave Filoni, and he's for us anyways, and we have no limitations. He's always open to anything that we want to try, and he fosters an extremely safe, like I was talking with Dina about it. It's kind of remarkable what he's done. He's been able to create a really safe creative environment while still saying no when he needs to or wants to, saying no in a very constructive kind of way. And so we feel really safe to experiment and do whatever we want.
What
Yeah,
is
do it.
Oh, go ahead.
Do whatever we want. It's maybe
Yeah, and
strong.
so in terms of, yeah, I mean, Lucasfilm to us is Dave Filoni, pretty much. That's our and Dave is incredibly creative. Um, I mean, like we've said, he really leaned into the samurai vibe, and started that with Tales of the Jedi, which I think that was his homage to Studio Ghibli. I don't know. I never know how to say it. And then continued it with Ahsoka. So I mean, he gives us direction like any really good director. In fact, better direction than almost any director I've ever worked with. I mean, he's incredible.
I'm curious about in Ahsoka, there's an original song by Sarah Tudson. It's called Igya Ka, I believe. And so I would just love to hear you guys talk about writing songs in the Star Wars universe using different languages or alien languages and creating a sound that kind of fits the lore of all of that.
Yeah, it's really fun because that definitely feels like a spot to really stretch your legs and really mess around with stuff that isn't really John Williams at this point. And uh that one was terrifying to approach because there I believe it was just temped with like a legendary motorcycle song. Like you hear the song and you think of like every like famous movie that has somebody driving on a road trip on a motorcycle. And I was like, how the hell are we going to like match this? How are we going to make something that feels as legendary as like this moment, and like and introduce like one of our main characters? And um it felt so intimidating that I was like, you know what? Like fuck it. Like let's just go for it. Let's just like try something that feels crazy, that feels um like in our wheelhouse. Like I played in Sarah's band for a while. I played in Illuminati Hotties. I played bass for her for a couple legs of tour, and I had such a good time. She's such a great musician. And it felt like her energy and like her kind of like angsty like punk rock mentality really suited the rebel that Sabine was for that for Ahsoka. And that was kind of how we built it. And we're just like, let's make a punk song, let's match Sabine, let's not try to like worry about like the motorcycle feeling of it. Let's focus on the character and where she's at and what it feels like she would be listening to.
The
And then
rebelliousness. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. And then all of the other stuff for Bad Batch that we get to make for like the jukebox, every bar that we have to walk into, which is a lot more than I ever thought it would be. There's a lot of bars, there's a lot of cantinas in Star Wars. I did, and uh, yeah, we always have to make up lyrics. We've tried to make English, um, or some songs that have English and like have like actual lyrics, and it never feels quite right. It always feels like too earthly somehow. It just makes it in our world. It doesn't make it feel as Star Wars. So like it's always better to go something like Huttese adjacent, and it's almost always gibberish. And sometimes like we'll pull from like kind of languages, like we'll pull from Huttese. Sometimes like I'll kind of look to like my roots and go with like a Tagalog little something like that feels kind of Filipino. And yeah, and just kind of match or like just really have fun with it.
Yeah, it's super fun. The song in Ahsoka and the songs in general in Star Wars because of that. Like you said, it feels otherworldly, and I always am curious about the creative challenge that's got to provide to everybody. Um, I've got a few more questions left, but obviously I want to make sure to ask the audience if they have any questions. If there's anybody in the chat or in the group here that has a question for the Kiners, I'm happy to, cede the floor, but I will, if you want to think about it, I'll keep going down my list of questions. Um, all right, well, we already have our first question. That's great. I'd love to know from each, what's your favorite of the Star Wars shows you've worked on?
Oh man.
Well, I mean, it's kind of got to be Ahsoka, I think, if we had to pick a favorite. But that's very difficult.
Yeah, there's
I
things
mean, because
from each one
we
that's
were
so different.
yeah. I mean, we were just so sad that when Bad Batch was over. I mean, we were sad, when Tech died in season 2 of Bad Batch,
Spoilers.
and spoilers. Yeah.
I'm still
And
not over that.
yeah, yeah. We get really, really personally attached to every show, and yeah, I mean, I could say something to each one. I mean, Clone Wars obviously kind of set the bar, and then Rebels, set the whole scene for what Ahsoka became,
Hmm.
and all those stories.
Fantastic. I'm curious, as a family unit, when does being related get to be a problem?
At the beginning.
Yeah.
Mostly at the beginning.
Yeah, honestly, it's like the ability to be so honest with each other is such an advantage that you don't have when you have a professional relationship with other creatives. You know, you can't be super honest with like a director or something. You know what I mean? There's like a lot of considerations you have to make. So I think that really makes us a lot stronger, being able to be like, oh, I like this, I didn't like this, you know, not being like blunt necessarily, just doing the work. I don't know. It's a big advantage.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right, Sean. I mean, I talk about all my collaborations, you know, and I could never talk to Gustavo or to, you know, Clint or David Arnold or anybody the way I can talk to you guys. And then,
I'm really glad you don't.
yeah, and well, and it's not. I mean, we're painting the picture like we're yelling at each other. That's shit. Let me try that, but it's not like that at all. Uh, I I think right now, and I never worked this way. Um, you know, Sean and Deana started really as a team together in so many ways where they were always running their cues past each other. And then they would come, this is way in the beginning, maybe 8 years ago or something. And then they would come to me and it's like, hey dad, what are you working on? I'm like, never mind, I'll just do it. I don't want your opinion. I think I really like you guys can do whatever you want, but I've been doing this for 40 years. Um, but now I'm way into that process. I think that's one of the things they brought, because they really do bounce ideas off of each other and say, hey, what do you think of this? What do you think of that? And they have a very, like Sean said, super honest relationship. And I mean, I've been doing this for so many years that, you know, I'm always trying to be fresh. And a lot of the times when you try to be too fresh, you do stupid things, you know, just because you're trying to be different. I mean, George Lucas can attest to that. I mean, you know, this is what I always say about George is, because George hates doing something he's done before. He hates doing things that other people have done before. He's always trying to push the envelope. Um, and you know, sometimes you're wrong when you're trying to, you know, when you're throwing things up against the wall. Um, so they're really good. I think we're all really good sounding boards for each other right now.
For the first 5 years or so, we were running things past Kevin before we would submit them, and even even at the point where Kevin like trusted us and felt like it was like, oh, you can just send it, I was still pretty apprehensive to be like, oh wait, no, like I need your opinion, like I need you to like affirm like if this is any good, or like if this is a mistake to go this far, or to be this simple, or anything. And um I still will send things to them, and just like it's so nice to be able to have like our experienced opinions of music and what we're doing, and be able to like bounce things off of each other and be like, oh, what the hell are you thinking? Like, that's crazy. Or like sometimes it's like, what the hell are you thinking? That's crazy. That's awesome. And like it'll be really cool. But yeah, we're really lucky that we get to work with each other.
Yeah, it's
And
like,
also the projects really, you know, when you work with other people or whatever, um, it's different being a family, because with us, each project is ours, you know, and we are invested in it, you know. So when we're working on Ahsoka, it's Sean, Deana, and me. It's our project. It's not just my project, and I'm, you know, throwing them cues or something like that. We're very, very invested in it. It's, you know, it's our name on it, and it's our brand, and it's our groove. And creatively, we feel very strongly about the quality and stuff. So um, I think that's one of the really great advantages.
yeah.
Well, one of my last questions for you is, do you work on music together outside of film and TV, or do you have your own personal music projects outside of film and TV?
I think I'm the only one at
You are
this point.
the only one.
You are the only one, yeah.
My external projects is changing diapers.
Yeah, exactly. Sean's very busy. Kevin is happy that we're helping him so much. I started I talked about it earlier. Once I picked up saxophone again, I realized that I can do whatever I want, and that was a weird revelation. Like I don't know. I feel like I've given myself so many rules for so long, and like a level of perfection that things have to be. And uh playing saxophone has been so fun and so um like different from how we score and how we like make film music, that like it felt so new and so fresh. And uh for me to like be able to like stretch creatively, and I've been making a bunch of instrumental music that's just saxophone, um along the lines of like artists, there's this player named Alabaster de Plume that I've been really, really loving. He's like a poet, and he also does, or like, and then all of his music is like a saxophone based, but it's very like lyrical, and it's very like kind of meditative, and having that to like just have some like creative what release has been really nice. And I'll be coming out with some stuff this year for that.
Very
Cool.
excited to hear it also.
Yeah,
I sent it to you. You still
how many
Send
tracks
it
are
to
you
me.
gonna release?
like
Steve?
months ago.
Yeah,
Oh,
I
did you
thought it
send
was
it in an
already.
email?
Don's really bad at checking his email. I am also the manager. I make sure that everyone emails and like knows when the links are.
I sent it to my email, but then didn't check my email. I didn't get it.
How many tracks are you gonna release, Deana?
So I accidentally made two albums, but I'm splitting it up to, I have an EP that I did that's like 5 tracks that I did all by myself. And for my album, we have about, I think, 12 pieces that I've worked with my friend Mal Hauser, who's been incredible to work with. And yeah, it's there's some orchestra, there's some saxophone, there's some flute. It's all over the place. It'll be really cool, I think.
Very cool. We have some questions that have popped up in the chat for you guys. One is, I'm curious to hear about the process of merging all your individual musical voices into the various projects and landing on a unified sound. So can you talk about that process?
Yeah, I think I can hit up on that because touch upon that because you know, after the spotting session where we talk with creatives and they give us the general direction, and after we've established together what the palette is going to generally be, we tend to split episodes up like with different narrative or emotional threads. And so one person will be following a specific thing. So even if at the beginning of a show our sounds like diverge, it feels very natural because we've already established what the palette's going to be and what the general tone is going to be. But it can be like wildly different, but it makes sense because it's for this. But, you know, it's almost like following leitmotif. It's like a musical voice or composer voice as leitmotif. So that very naturally lends itself, and we're always listening to each other's stuff, so things do like converge, and eventually we're able to take. It's like, oh, I know, I really like what you did for this character in this episode. I'm going to take this scene because I really like it, but I'm definitely going to you know, use what you've done previously on this. And the second question, do you all use the same DAW? Yes, we all use Logic Pro X, and that facilitates what I'm talking about because we will take in each other's sessions, like literally just import an instrument or MIDI, you know, either as reference or as, you know, actually using it in the new scene.
Yeah, we try to stay current with the versions as you know close as we can of Logic so that they're compatible. The other thing, the example I use is like I co-wrote CSI Miami with Jeff Cardoni for 10 years. And Jeff and I sort of started where he would take a particular kind of cue, like maybe the more emotional cues, and I would take the action cues. And by the second year, I was sick of doing action cues. He was sick of doing emotional cues, and so then I would start doing him. He would start doing me because you know we would listen to each other's stuff. and it's the same. It's very similar with Sean, Deana, and myself. It's for a while maybe Sean will be hearing a certain thing and he'll be doing that, but then he's done enough of that, and like the example I used about Dina's track when we were just spotting that somebody used it, from a previous season. That sounded just really fresh to me, and so now I want to take Dina's tracks in to my Logic session and do something with it, and that way, it kind of cross pollinates really naturally that way.
Ooh, I have a. Sorry, can I do one more on this one, because it just made me think specifically about the subject of, like, working with your family in Star Wars. The most dangerous thing with leitmotif is it wearing its welcome out, and I think that there's no quicker way for that to happen than to repeat it in the same key, in the same way, in the same instruments. And Star Wars, with John, he doesn't do that. His leitmotif is so elegant, and it can change radically, right? And by having three of us, I did a lot of Omega's theme, like cues, at the beginning of Bad Batch, but eventually I kind of ran out of like ways to do it with the compressed schedule. I was, I was like, okay, I've done some really good versions, but like after like 5 or 7 or whatever it is, I'm kind of out of interesting ways for me to approach this. And so being able to give that to Kevin or Deana and then see how they approach it in a really cool, interesting way that gives me ideas for the future. And so it's like, that's just like, and that's for each of us, you know what I mean? So something that Deana or Kevin comes up with, right? Eventually it's like, oh, I'm excited to get my hands on that and show my different take on it.
Yeah. Wonderful. Well, I want to thank you all so much for coming today to this Inside Sessions with the Alliance for Women Film Composers. It's been a pleasure talking to all of you Kiners about what you do. It's really wonderful. And yeah, if anybody watching wants to check out their latest work on Ahsoka, you can go to Spotify. There's 2 volumes worth of music, and then you can, of course, stream it on Disney Plus. So yeah, thanks everybody for being a part of this. Really appreciate it.